I hope watching this movie will bring the awareness of the severity of mental illness. As a nurse educator again, as I have said in the WeChat group in different situations, that it is really a disease. Mental illness is like a disease of the brain, just like hypertension that is to a blood vessel. So it's nothing to be ashamed or to be about. And then I think the first thing we really should open for discussion. Thank you.
So I want to just recognize that watching this film often brings up a lot of emotions, and I know it always does for me. So before we move on to the discussion and question and answer, I'd like to ask us to take a moment of silence, just a very, very brief reflection, so we can pause and reflect on whatever might be coming up for you. And I'd like to ask everyone to please close their eyes for this moment of reflection. Take a deep breath and let it out. You can take this time to think about or identify a particular takeaway from the film, or a particular personal thought or memory that carries meaning for you. If you are of a faith background, you're also welcome to lift up a prayer for Luke's family, for a friend or family member, or for yourself. I'd like to share a brief poem that was one of Luke's favorites. It's entitled Heaven by Patrick Phillips. It will be the past, and we'll live there together. Not as it was to live, but as it is remembered. It will be the past, we'll all go back together. Everyone we ever loved and lost and must remember. It will be the past, and it will last forever. So about a week ago, Justin and I both participated in the Let's Talk conference at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. That was included in the film. It's a annual conference that's really phenomenal and very, very similar to this. It targets Asian parents, primarily Chinese parents, and we screened Looking for Luke at that conference on Saturday. And Luke's parents wrote a statement specifically to be read at that conference, to be shared with the parents, and I'd like to share that letter today with all of you. Greetings in the name of our Lord. We would like to thank everyone for attending this screening. We'd like to thank the Mass General Hospital Clay Center, and we want to thank the filmmakers Eric and Elaine. This movie would not have been possible without their dedication and hard work. 2 years ago, Luke left us suddenly, which devastated our family, church, school, and community. During the past 2 years, we have been searching through our son's journals and notes, trying to more deeply understand his life. In the process, we've seen glimpses of how profound his depression was and how hard he struggled to overcome it. Recalling the past, we might have overlooked some signs of his struggles. If we had been warned at that time, things might have been different. By making this film, we would like to share our story with everyone, parents, teachers, and students. We need to more fully understand our children and loved ones and let them know how much we care. We hope that after viewing this film, you would have a better understanding of Luke's life and help spread awareness of mental health. Together, we can avoid future tragedies, building lives of hope and community. Thank you. So now, thank you, Paul and Justin, for joining. I think, I don't know how we are on time. When we have done this at other screenings, and Justin has participated in a number of them for me, sometimes he and I and other panelists will talk for a bit, just some of our reflections on the film, and to talk a little bit about some of the stressors and pressures that Asian American youth can face, and some of the challenges also of being a parent and some of that cultural gap. But given that this film has been a part of a larger day, and I think Paul did such an amazing job this morning of kind of framing some of those challenges, and Justin as well, I almost wonder if maybe we can transition to Q&A and opening to the audience after maybe some brief comments. Do you want to say a few things, Justin, briefly, or Paul? So we'll open it up to questions, and I will also say, so there are some colored index cards on the table. I'm sorry, not kind of the notepads on your table. If anyone feels more comfortable sharing their comment or question by writing it down, we do want to give people that opportunity. Though we're happy to hear from you in whatever form, but just from having done these screenings before, I know sometimes people feel more comfortable asking their question anonymously. So please know you can write on that notepad, and maybe some volunteers at periodic intervals can come by and just collect them, and they'll bring them up to us, and we'll get through as many questions as we can. But otherwise, we'd like to open it up for questions from the audience. That's right.
Hi, thank you. It's a very touching movie. As we are looking for Luke, Luke is looking for something that's very important for him. It's the meaning of life. I wonder, does your center have a program dedicated to help students think about this question? What's the meaning of life and how to find the meaning of your own life? Thank you.
Just to answer the center part, we do not, but that would be probably useful. And I think some of the issues he was struggling with, it seems that Luke had depression, but also these kind of philosophical or epistemologic questions that are much deeper. And I wonder actually if Paul might want to say something about that, because that's, as we were saying, life is more than, we went past the academic, but there's so many other layers that were just not addressed, I think.
I fully understand the father, the parents, things like that. When that happened, particularly happened in a Christian family, you will blame yourself. What happened? What did I do wrong? I guess that everything happens for a purpose. God makes things happen in mysterious ways. What we can do is to look forward and learn from the past experience. We can never be perfect, but we can look forward. Regarding purpose of life, I think that's the conversation we need to have with our children. At a very young age, I recall when I grew up, I always struggled with that question, and sometimes I descend into depression, what happened after I died, right? So that kind of question really bothers you. I think I didn't feel comfortable talking to my parents about those questions. I guess, sometimes we're so busy. Parents are busy, and we kept our children busy. We don't talk about those things. Even in Christian families, I would admit that although our faith tells us that between the world and God, there is only one choice. But sometimes we Christians want to grab both. So I guess that may add even another layer of stress to ourselves and to our children. I guess, it's a tough question. No one can be freed from depression. I guess that's the awareness and maybe communication, conversation can help. I have no answer.
And just to add to that, to kind of the original part in terms of does the center kind of directly address this question, I'm one of the affiliated faculty with Justin's center that he was talking about earlier. So to reiterate what Justin said, at this point, though it's interesting to think about, we don't have a specific program or protocol to address this question. That being said, I think both in the work that we do at the center and then the work that he and I both do individually as clinicians, I'm going to say this now, and I'm quite certain this will come up again and again over the next 40 minutes or so while we're talking, is at the end of the day, I think this all ultimately boils down to communication, and why we say communication and open lines of communication and an openness and a non-judgmental stance to dialogue and being curious about what your children think, and hopefully your children learning to have some curiosity about what you think, that can be a really wonderfully supportive forum to explore whatever questions come up, whether they be questions related to bigger existential questions about faith and the meaning of life, or more some of the daily stressors, right? What we don't want is that anybody, children and adults, of holding all of those kind of bigger struggles or stressors inside. And the second point I just want to make briefly is I'm an adult psychiatrist, but also a child and adolescent psychiatrist, and I would say 95% of my work is working with kids and teens and families. And sometimes I think we forget how sophisticated and the weight and the breadth and depth of thoughts that very, very young children can have. And I think sometimes adults think that a child's life is very simple, or a teenager's life, is really simple. But it's actually fairly complex. And young kids, and you can see like Luke, he started having these questions that we think like maybe around 4th grade, in terms of meaning of life, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know, not to say every 4th grader is having that difficulty, but as a child psychiatrist, I'm also not surprised, because I'm stunned every day by the kinds of thoughts and questions that young children and teenagers will share with me. Is there another question?
I just want to share from my personal experience something about depression for youth. After watching the movie Looking for Luke, it's very touching. What I want to say is that the problem is probably a lot more than many of us know. And I, over the last many years, have had the opportunity to work with a lot of international students, many of them my friends, sons and daughters who come to here to study in high schools and universities. And in Columbus, I actually, sometimes people say I'm the one with the most nephews and nieces. I have experienced. Last year I went to a funeral with the parents from Qingdao of their son who is just about to graduate. It's the most heartbroken thing you can ever go to. And I went to look for a girl who locked herself in an apartment, and who actually didn't know the eviction notice was on the door. And had we not found her, it could be very serious. And I went to Connecticut to move a kid from a high school to Columbus so we could look after him. And so on. So I have seen a lot of these things in my own personal experience. It's so hard to understand how the teenagers think, and it's so hard to understand the cause of depression. But it's there, and it's really more serious than many of us think. Just like Luke's parents, he would never thought his son would be suffering so serious an issue. From the movie, we could see his father probably still didn't understand at the time. Why would he do it? And it's one of the most outstanding boy on the series you will see, and the Sunshine Boy. He was suffering, and I've seen many of those situations, so I understand them very much. And many of our parents probably are like Luke's parents. We don't realize how serious that problem is. That's something I want to share. And I also want to share something my good friend Paul, whom I admire and respect very much, had to say earlier. Never compare your kids. I am a father of 3 boys who, in my eyes, are always the best. From very young, I always tell them, you are the best, you are the best. Okay, and they are very good. But each are very different, and they all want to. They are all excellent in your eyes, but they are all very different. They want to be their own person. I distinctly remember one time I was talking with my son, my oldest son, and he's a pretty good kid. He went to a very good school and was the class president and was very confident and very successful in normal ways. And I was talking in a very casual way about the achievement and success of another kid. And I was actually not comparing him. But he interrupted me and he just told me, "Dad, are you comparing me?" And that really startled me. And he didn't have a lot to fear or to be not sure about himself. But however, he is very sensitive about being compared, and I think many kids are like that. So what Paul said earlier is a very good advice. Don't compare your kids.
Thank you.
They're honest.
Thank you so much for sharing your own personal story, but also your experience of seeing this as a broader problem. And I just want to reiterate that is exactly right. So 1 in 12 U.S. college students will make a suicide plan, and every year about 1,100 college students will die by suicide. And then there were a number of statistics cited earlier this morning, and we do know that Asian American high school students and college students are at higher risk, and they demonstrate higher rates of suicidal thinking. So yes, this is a bigger problem than I think most people realize. I also do want to make a quick point before moving on to some other questions, is that depression can be deadly. And this is why we're showing this film. We want to break the silence and start having conversations. That being said, depression, like all illnesses, there's a continuum. And so by breaking the silence, our hope is that we can help these kids, get them support, get them to not feel so isolated, alone earlier on, because depression is very treatable. It's very, very treatable. It becomes deadly when it's not treated, and when someone is suffering in silence, and when someone is suffering in silence for a long time.
I just want to add, depression has been called the secret we all share, and the idea is that it's so common. So just like the gentleman said, but if you don't talk about it, it's like it doesn't exist. And then there's almost the sense, as Luke's father said, that you blame the victim. So if you're depressed, it's something that you did wrong, it's your own fault, or something about you. So I think this breaking the silence is key.
There is a question regarding the faith in general, Christian faith in particular. What is it good if Luke is a Christian, active in the church, perfect student, that still is still content with depression, meaning of life. So what is good to have religion? And the other question is related. Should we discuss with kids what is heaven, what is hell? So, depression may come in different forms. I'm not an expert on that. I think depression, many sources, and the film makes us aware that even your kids are a good student and active in the church, surrounded by friends in the church, he's still not immune to depression. I think that's abundantly clear, and that's I would love to maybe show the film in the church, and we need to be aware of that. But is religion counterproductive or bad, right? So it seems to, I would say that even, I have a friend actually, I asked her why you're not letting your kids to go to church. And he said that, I wanted my kids to be self-reliant, not rely on somebody else. basically not relying on God, right? He needs to be dependent. But the risk of that is that when they only know that they have themselves to rely on, when they go to a very challenging competitive environment, all of a sudden, everybody's so competitive, all of a sudden they realize that, oh gosh, my own strength is not adequate, it's not enough. And that could be a source of depression. So I don't think religion itself, by looking at the film, religion itself on trying to understand meaning of life will be bad for the kids. Obviously, we need to have more, we need to be aware of the problems and have more conversation. I still believe having a community to support you, to be involved in church and communities, other activities, or religious activities, or other charitable activities, is good overall for mental health, mental wellness of the kids. I firmly believe that.
And just briefly, I want to underscore this, that the message of this film, or one of the messages of this film, is not at all to imply that his faith or religion was the cause of him being depressed and suicidal. I think, like most things in life, there are many paths to success. Meaning, I wish I could give all of you, I'm sure we all wish this, we could give you this very simple checklist, religion, yes or no, this school, yes or no. I mean, it's not as simple as that. I think this whole idea of treating each of your children as an individual underscores the flexibility. So I think whatever makes sense for you and your family, and whatever makes sense for your child and what your child, based on their personality and interest, and to build that support that Paul is talking about, whether that support involves a faith community or not, there are many, many ways. And so it's not to say that you have to have religion or religion is bad. I think you just have to have open dialogue. And it's about getting to know your children and learning the best way to support them.
There are a lot of good questions that I want to just kind of summarize here. So how do we identify depression from being overstressed? There's so many kids who look so happy and sunny from the outside, but deep inside they are troubled and suffering from depression. How could a young kid handle the two sides of this, and how to tell them they are in trouble at the early stage of mental illness? And then relatedly, when is the right time to seek for medical help? Is there a good guide for us to follow? So a lot about how do you identify depression, what's the difference between like stress and sadness and depression, and then how do you convince someone to seek help? So these are great questions and I want to try to answer. Oh, another one, what are the early signs of depression? How do we as parents know that other kids? So I'll take a stab and then Julianne will probably answer more from the child psychiatry perspective. But I think part of the difficulty here is that everyone has felt sad before. It's normal, right? This part of if someone dies or if you don't get a promotion, all these things will cause sadness. And so we also use these terms very casually, like, oh, I'm so depressed because, they're out of my favorite food at the cafeteria. People will say something very casually. But actually we know that there's some depression, almost you could say with a capital D, is a different entity. That's when these symptoms are lasting longer and they become more severe. And we think of depression as a syndrome. So it's not a disease because we can't diagnose it with a blood test or a brain scan, but we see this over and over, this constellation of symptoms. So that's changes in your appetite. Usually it's you lose your appetite, you don't eat anymore. Sometimes people eat more than usual. Often it's sleep disturbances, so people can no longer sleep well. If they have low energy, if they can't concentrate at work because their mind is always thinking about negative things. If they start to isolate, not talking to people, they stop hanging out with their friends, if they're crying a lot. And if you start hearing things like, I'm worthless, or I'm no good, I'm a burden on people, that's very troubling. That's something you want to check in on. And of course, if you hear someone talk about suicide, I wish I didn't have to wake up in the morning, or I wish I wasn't around, that's very serious. And all the evidence shows that if you talk to someone about suicide, it actually decreases their risk of killing themselves. It doesn't increase it. So don't be afraid to talk about it. Part of the danger is when people feel there's no one to talk to. That's the more risky. And then just before suicide, we had this question a lot too, but people often become very agitated, anxious, can't sleep. It's like a hyper-arousal state. And so if someone is very agitated, then you might think about bringing them more quickly, like to the emergency room. Any emergency room can evaluate someone for something like suicide. But these are great questions. So in terms of figuring out about depression earlier, again, like Juliana said, the key is communication. So hopefully the best thing to do would be to open the communication with your kids so that they feel like they can talk to you. And if not you, then someone else. That, you know, there's never that they're doing it alone.
I agree with everything that Justin just said. Just a couple additional points, not to confuse everyone, but I think another really good point, a really important point to make is that oftentimes as clinicians, another thing that we look at, in addition to this checklist of symptoms, is a person's functioning, right? So are they doing the things that they normally would do? And for students, a lot of that revolves around school and activity. So are they getting good grades? Are they still going to orchestra? Are they still going to swim team or whatever it may be? Are they still performing to the level that they typically perform? And to complicate things a little bit is that with Asian American students, what we find often is though in general with depression, you see a decrease in functioning, and you very, very often with teenagers and younger kids see a slip in grades. But with Asian American students, somewhat not surprisingly, you don't always see that, because even as they are struggling emotionally, they persevere with their school and their activities. And I think that is actually somewhat part of the problem, because they are so good at working really, really hard. And so to say, oh, my kid is still getting A's, or my kid is still, you know, playing the violin, that doesn't necessarily mean that everything is okay. It's these other markers that Justin is talking about. And then I'd also say, just to simplify it a little bit, I would just say if your child feels different, if they feel off to you in some way, if something just kind of a red flag kind of just pops up in your head, and even then doesn't necessarily mean that they're depressed, but I would say anytime you notice a change in your child, good or bad, right, I would be curious about it. I want to know what was going on, because teenagers naturally don't necessarily share everything with their parents, and that's developmentally appropriate and okay for them not to come share with you. They're not being bad teenagers. That is actually developmentally what a teenager is supposed to do. But gosh, if you notice a change, if they're more withdrawn or irritable, but similarly, if they come home and they're beaming one day, or they're, you know, I would want to be curious. Hey, what's going on? Well, you know, you look really happy. Did something happen today? If you're curious and not judgmental, each little episode of interaction like that can just further open the channel of communication. And then in terms of kind of symptoms, another symptom I'll just mention, and again, every person is different, but a lot of research shows that in Asian American communities and others, but definitely in the Asian American community and Asian community, and also in young kids, sometimes the manifestation of emotional distress can sometimes manifest as physical. So some of you in the room may experience this. We all do to varying degrees, but you may get a headache, a stomach ache, you know, tension in your shoulders. But particularly little kids, they might first say to you, my tummy hurts, my head hurts, or I feel dizzy or something. And it's not really about them physically feeling that. They're actually emotionally feeling something. They just haven't yet learned the language, and it's easier for them to convey it through physical symptoms.
Justin, can I have several live questions first? They've been waiting for a while. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming, for the comment. I really appreciate that documentary, and I was very touched by the story. One thing I was particularly shocked by was almost everybody missed the cue. Like all the friends, parents, they were all in shock. My question, probably you already answered some, is as Chinese parents now raising American kids, there particularly something about our own Chinese culture that we take certain things for granted, but we don't always understand what our children going through growing up in the United States. How can we make ourselves more accessible to our kids? How are we become more discerning, to notice their differences and make them more willing to talk to us? Or how can we make ourselves as a friend for our children rather than authoritative, Mom, you have to listen to me. Thank you.
I'll take a crack at it. I think one of the mistakes I always had is that whenever my son talked to me or my children talk to me, I like to give advice. You know, I felt like I have a lot of experience, I have gone through a lot, I can teach you a lot. A lot of time, they just need you to listen. Yeah, I think one of the lessons I want to learn, I'm still learning, I hope everyone can realize, is that sometimes just listen. You don't have to teach all the time. You don't have to talk each time, and sometimes what you do already is teaching. If you're committed to the family, committed to what you do, and you have strong work ethics, you care about other people, and that shows, and you don't have to teach that, and your kids can learn from what you do. And they really want you to listen to them. I think, yeah, that would be my take on that question.
To add to Paul's answer, I completely agree with that. And the fact that, so you don't have to teach everything. And you mentioned this earlier in your speech this morning, and I agree with that. Not everything has to be a lesson, a teachable moment. And I would say that by listening, you are teaching. You're modeling something for your child, and you're actually allowing your child to teach themselves something. Your child is then in that moment learning how to identify their emotions, how to name their emotions, how to problem solve, how to share something with another person. These are lifelong valuable skills that develop resiliency and strength and cut across. These are skills that can be useful in relationships and in work. So I actually think embedded in there actually is still learning. And then I would say this idea of listening is so true. In Justin's talk earlier, that aided in the first point of being acknowledged, and that's definitely true. And I'll sometimes say to parents, all parents I think are usually best at, the easiest thing is the advice or the content of what they want to say, right? You know what you want to say to your child, and so you share that. But before you get to the content, I would say this acknowledge piece and the listening is so important. So be calm, be curious, be compassionate, and also be concerned. You are their parents. You don't need to be their best friends. They have friends. You are still their parent. And though I appreciate a lot of parents often saying to us, we want to be our child's friend, you're not supposed to be their friend. You are still their parent, and so that